people are working 14 hours, 16 hours, 12 hours a day. They're doing 2 jobs or 3 jobs just to meet ends. Naturally, when the pie shrinks, you don't get many jobs. Rather, there'll be layoffs. So they're going to be massive layoff, and they're already a layoff in that. About a check with the one big bank, their payroll has been cut by around 30% in the last 1.5 years. So there are many large pool of people who are not finding it easy to have 2 meals a day for their family members. Every economy you see, every rise you see, there are those cutthroat, competitive businessmen. They bring things up. You need to regulate them. You need to give them a direction.
Hello and welcome to InferTalks, a podcast where I put you in the room with some of the biggest thought leaders from around the world. Today for this podcast, to speak on rising electricity bills, fuel prices, and more, I have Director Research, Business Recorder, Mr. Ali Khizar. Ali, welcome to InferTalks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
All right, Ali, let's start our conversation. My very first question is that the government at this point in time does not seem to be at the end of its bravado when it comes to, the economic situation. And while there's very little likelihood that the government might default, on the other hand, we really see the consumers really struggling in terms of, being able to meet their expenses. How would you go ahead and explain this situation?
You rightly pointed out that the consumer really facing the brunt in terms of the inflation and all that. Just to give a little perspective to that, that food prices have been doubled in the last 2.5 years. And overall, prices from the CPI index are doubled in the last 4 years or something. So these are very grave situations. And people in Pakistan are really facing a crunch. Last year you got an inflation of about 30% and your GDP growth was negative. That's unprecedented in Pakistan. We had a period of high 30% inflation in the past, like in 1974, 1975, we had inflation of 25-30% at that point of time, but at the time GDP was growing at 5-6%. So as long as GDP is growing and you have a high inflation, you're not in as bad of situation as you are as of now. Like in Turkey, you see the situation is not that bad. They were very high inflation, but things were. But when your economy is really falling, that your GDP is contracting, and you high inflation, that's a problem of stagflation. And when you're using those administrative measures to control things, and you reduce the capacity, the productivity of a high sector where the productivity is higher, and you let go the sector where the productivity is low, because those sectors usually work in the essential sectors, while those where productive sector are non-essential. So you kind of have that kind of a strategy which is there, which wasn't planned. It's just an abrupt policy because of the policy leaders who were around were looking from the political angles for the past 2.5 years. Those with the helm of the economic policy making, the state bank, the Ministry of Finance, they come up with that. And eventually they turn up into the political situation as well. And we see the situation we are. People are facing crunch. People are changing their lifestyles. People are cutting down their expenses. The lower on the income category you are, higher the cutting expenses you have, and then you cut expenses on the essentials. And if you are a little above the on income strata, then you're cutting non-essential expenses. But again, there are lifestyle changes, and that's going to stay with you. That's going to stay with you this time. It's not a good situation to have any.
But Ali, let's get honest. So far as the inflation is concerned, it just appears to be like the leaky bucket metaphor for the local consumers. It just appears that no matter how much water you pour in, it will eventually keep leaking. So, is there really anything that the local consumers can do to make sure that at the end of the month they have something in their kitty?
They have to work more. They have to moonlight. They have to do more than one job. And many people you see they're doing multiple jobs over there. And the businesses who are doing they're cutting down. They're living on their savings. So there's not much you can do apart from trying to increase your expenses, and then you try to economize your expenditure as well. You try to budget in a smart way. but there's a limit to budget in a smart way when you're already in a tight budget. So essentially, you have to earn more, and those who do the services sector, people are increasingly trying to work outside Pakistan while sitting in Pakistan, but that's not easy, and that's limited to very few people who are educated, who have certain skill set, who have access to market outside Pakistan, service industry where they can work, they do, but majority of the people they don't have. They're doing very hard work. Maybe people are working 14 hours, 16 hours, 12 hours a day. They're doing two jobs or three jobs just to meet ends. So it's very difficult situation for consumer, but nonetheless, you need to cut down your expenses and you need to go smart about the budget that people perhaps have to do. And there might be some startups and some options are coming up over the period of time which you help you to economize your budget. But having said that, it's not going to be easy for anyone.
But Ali, since you said that businesses themselves have been actually facing the brunt of the contraction of the economy itself, even if the people were to try to go ahead and find jobs, at the end of the day, they might have very limited options, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. If you see that the most vibrant sector of the Pakistan outside the agriculture domain, which I talk more on the urban side, is the retail and wholesale sector. And retail and wholesale sector was not doing that bad last year, but this year, when you see the numbers are falling. If you see that the beverages consumption is down by 25% in the last quarter or so, and if you see other kind of retailing items, they started declining in that. And distributor who in the chain of the value chain are finding it hard to provide the liquidity from where they can finance the products and provide it to the retailer, and retailer is finding it hard to sell it to the people. And so every chain, the margins are cutting and the retailer is not coming. So overall, the pie is shrinking. Pie is shrinking, and naturally, when the pie shrinks, you don't get many jobs. Rather, there will be layoffs. So they're going to be massive layoff, and they're already a layoff in that. I checked with the one big bank. Their payroll has been cut by around 30% in the last 1.5 years. So that's a big decline, big decline. Some people are leaving the country. Some people are going from one company to the other company, but majorly it's a decline. Then in the wholesale retail sector, which is largely informal, there are lots of jobs which are going. Then the construction is another sector which is a huge in terms of employment generation. There you see the prices of the steel, the prices of the other inputs, and the purchasing power of people is declining. So that construction sector is not doing good as well. So the jobs are being lost. So what I'm talking about, what people can do, provide, can moonlight and provide more services and do one, two, three jobs are those who have certain skill set, and those skill set they can sit home using their computer and can provide some and can get some kind of a supplement income. Those people are looking for that, but the people down the road who doesn't have that skill set, who are into the construction sector, who into the retail sector, who are a factory worker and all that, these guys are really finding it hard to live by. And that's why are actually there are many large pool of people who are not finding it easy to have two meals a day for their family members.
Ali, if I may interrupt you and ask you a very important question. You're director of research at the Business Recorder. Have you really thought into this, or have you really tried investigating this issue? That how much is it directly attributed to reasons like inflation, that people are actually thinking to move abroad or look for opportunity overseas? Have you come across any studies or investigated in any manner which would sort of help you establish that relationship, or would that be incorrect to reach to a conclusion like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you see the anecdotes, people are leaving and people leaving at large numbers in the corporate sector and all that. But if you see the overall picture of the country, I mean, in 2015 or 16, you got 1 million people almost left the country. Then the number started reducing in the COVID years, and there was much less number. And after the COVID year, last year, there was a spike of 600,000 or something like that. People, I don't have those numbers on top of my mind, but the number have spiked up. But the reason of this spike is really coming because of the low base of the COVID. But if you go into 2015, 16, at that time, the large number of people were living abroad. But there is a difference here when you talk to the people, when you do to try to talk to the corporate people. I mean, today I was talking to one of the bank trader, and this guy was saying, okay, I have to do lots of job in myself because six of my people are left and they moved outside the country. Now I'm struggling to find new people, so I have to put extra hour on the work, which my juniors used to do that. And then when I talked to some IT company, they said that they have a payroll of about 1,200 people and they have a 50 people around leaving every month. Then I talked to the other corporate companies in the different fields of finance, marketing, and all that. You see, the good talent is simply going outside the country, and they're finding it hard to replace that talent. So that's a problem at this side where the numbers do not show in terms of the Bureau of Immigration. The data is not showing that number in that kind of a reflection, but that bureau that number showing is something similar to 2015-16 in terms of the workers, in terms of the people who go to UAE, who go to Saudi Arab and places like that, carpenter, electrician, laborer, extra. Those kind of skill set people, they are leaving. They were living at a higher number now. They perhaps are living at a similar number now. But the people who were really in the key position in the corporate sector, they are leaving in bulk. Then you talk to the Seth people, the rich people of Pakistan. The rich people of Pakistan, the elite who have big businesses present in Pakistan. Now, those people have so much invested in Pakistan and so much to do from the Pakistan. Even the kids of there, the guys who are in, girls in the 20s or 30s, they don't want to come to Pakistan. They don't want to live in Pakistan. They feel suffocated. They feel that the overall air quality is not good. They feel that the food quality is not good. They feel that the social security is not there. They feel that the people put a finger on that you're a rent seeker and all that. So those guys are increasingly trying to remain outside the Pakistan despite they have such a strong business connection here. So at a different income strata, higher the income strata you go, more people are leaving now. Lower income strata, they don't have an option. They're living at a similar number which was there in 2015, 16, and as of now. But higher income strata people, they're living at a much higher number now. And that's a worry because the talent pool is shrinking. And that talent pool is not going to be filled from inside because anyone who has good option perhaps would try and would leave from us.
So Ali, now let's speak of the electricity sector. We alluded to that point, while we were giving this intro about the conversation. Let me then ask you, we've seen the electricity prices rise. Do you see any kind of soul searching within the government that it might force them to probably go ahead and privatize these DESCOs, or perhaps at the same time try and reduce the line losses and then at the same time renegotiate the tariffs with the independent power plants? Or do you think, the business as usual will continue?
Well, first I need to, cut down your bill in two parts. If you're paying 55 rupees on average units you buy, where does that 55 rupees goes? About 7 rupees goes to the fuel cost. The fuel you buy and put into the power plants, that costs is 7 rupees. Then there's an 18 rupees cost of the capacity that power plants you have, and you pay on the loans and equity of that, that's 18 rupees. So 7 plus 18 is about 25 rupees. Then you pay about three and a half rupees for the margins of distribution companies as they buy and all that. You come to that. So that's come about 7 plus 18 25 plus 3 28 and a half. Then that's plus O&M charges. Maybe it's a smaller number, 1 rupee of that, 29 and a half. Or let's put it like this is about 30 rupees. Yeah. Then you have about 3 rupees of line losses, which are higher than the permissible. That's 33. Right? Then you have a cross subsidy. If you're using the units more than 700, you're paying subsidy for the guy who's using 100 unit, 200 units. That 6 rupees goes to that amount. That's up to 41 rupees. Then you have surcharges. There's a circulated legacy where you pay 3.5 rupees on the interest you pay on that. Then you have a GST of 17%. Then you have an income tax deduction on all that. So when you add those taxes, which is about 10, 12 rupees, you get into 5, 51, 52, 53 rupees. And then you have a fuel price surcharge as well, which comes part of the fuel price initially, and that take the fuel price, actual fuel price to 8.5, 9 rupees. So if you see that the biggest cost is the capacity payment, the second biggest cost is the cross subsidy, and second biggest is your taxes, the third biggest is your cross subsidy, and a fourth is your fuel, and the fifth is your distribution margin, and approximately the similar amount of the distribution margin is going into the theft, which is above the permissible limit. So if you reduce that theft to zero, your prices would come down by 3.5 rupees, not that much. Having said that, you need to do that. But the problem is not that you just need to cut the losses for the privatization. The DESCO, if you privatize the DESCO, they will increase the consumption. And increase the consumption would reduce the capacity charge. But that's a bit that you increase the consumption by just putting off your AC 24/7, just that your capacity would utilize more. No, as long as your marginal cost is higher than your average cost, like in case of the your marginal cost is about 28, your average cost is 28.5 rupees. And if you, because before the taxes and the distribution margin and blah, blah, blah. And if you're producing at a cost higher than that, like that's why LNG at this point of case, there's no point of producing it. It's going to increase the cost. So you need to find out the protective ways to increase it. You need to find ways of distribution companies to be innovative to enhance your pie, and you need to have a more vibrant generation mix. You need to have lesser presence of the government in that, in terms of moving away from the government, so that those cross subsidy elements should come down, and distribution losses should come down. But having said that, in the short run, there is no way to move away from that unless you reduce the taxes. But I mean, you have to collect the GST. Your fiscal position is much worse than your bijli ki position.
Ali, to re-put my question, is there any way that the government can, come up with some sort of a solution which would make things easier for the consumer at the end of the day? Or do you think there's hardly any remedy for the consumers at all?
I mean, in the short run, I don't see there is any solution that you can reduce the prices drastically. But in the medium term, you can do that. That you need to find the productive assets, productive, portion of the consumption which are not on your electricity, is to bring on the electricity. For example, you have the high consumption of captive power plants for your industrial use, which are highly productive. Bring that to the grid. You have a very higher consumption on fuel on using the internal combustion engine on the bikes, cars, and the buses. So car is a difficult job. You can bring slowly the bikes into the system. You can transform the buses into the electric system. So that's why the productive assets would come into that. Your import build on the fuel would decline, and you would deploy more fuels on the power plants, which are more efficient, and that way you reduce it. But it's not easy to reduce it. And when you say that capacity maybe is 18 rupees, and you need to reduce it down, for that you need to renegotiate the projects. The projects' lives are 25 to 40 years, but there are many projects whose debt are being paid at the moment, and these debt are being paid in 10 years. So the projects which came in the last 3, 4 years, you're paying their debts, and you're going to pay those debt for the next 6, 7 years. And that's going to be very heavy amount in that. So in order to reduce it, you need to renegotiate it, but that's easier said than done. So you need to deploy more productive assets towards electricity, so that electricity become affordable. For example, when you drive a bike on a ICE engine, internal combustion engine, its efficiency is 25%, and the cost what incurred to the consumer in terms of your fuel is higher. If that guy is driving on the bike, on EV, the cost to him is much less. And even if you're supplying a expensive electricity, it's cheaper for him. So you need to find out those where you're using inefficient way of fuel to convert to the electricity, so that overall energy expense of the people to decline, and in that way the electricity bill in itself would not look as big as it is today.
So, Ali, now let me ask you, but do you really seem to see any willingness on part of the government to go ahead and renegotiate those capacity payments with the IPPs, or for that matter, cut down the line losses, which are soaringly so high at this point in time?
So you think the problem, the line is not as simple as you say. I mean, you have a very high losses in areas of KP and areas of Kashmir part of that. If you do that, the Kashmir part, and when you ask them to pay take the bill, they said, okay, thank you, Vabda, whatever the discourse you are providing, take your stuff out of here. We have our protection. Let us. We have our the hydel over there. Let them produce. So it's a very difficult political economic question. Similar go to the GB, and that's why you see the situation over there is not that good. And you can't see those situations in the media, but over because of the high electricity bills, and in some places they have reversed the bill as well because of that high electricity bill. People are facing the problem, and when you do go to the KP, there are tribal areas that when you go to the Balochistan, there are very high losses over there because of the political and security concerns over there. You cannot collect over there. I mean, when you talk about the Lahore, when you talk about the Islamabad, when you talk about the Multan, these ISCO, FESCO, MEPCO, LESCO, all those are performing well. The losses are there where the political problems are big. So it's not that easy to break it down and bring it down to low, but you need to bring it down. But the gains would not be huge to translate into numbers where your bill could decline significantly.
All right, Ali, now let's speak about, recovery rates and ability of the people to pay back their electricity bills. Ever since when we've had the new electricity prices go into force, you recently tweeted about the district of Hangu itself, where there was quite a drastic decline from all the way, if I have it correctly, from 72% down to 60% in the last month, or perhaps in the last couple of months, I suppose. How do you see this trend, taking place in other districts of the country? If that is the case, will there be any relief in the short term, even if the DESCOs were to be privatized, or some of these other issues like tariffs being renegotiated with the IPPs, in any way bringing any relief to the consumers at all, in the short term at least?
You see, that's the thing. That's the thing. You need to understand the cycle of the electricity. We all understand. We all pay our bills. Our bills in summer is usually higher, and the winter is low. So the summer few months, the bill is usually very high, right? And then this summer month, July, August, when all this fiasco of electricity bill were coming, the people were paying. The someone is earning 20,000, he's paying at a 25,000 bill. You must be paying 50, 60, 70,000 bill of your house and all that, and people even paying more on that. So that's a problem for people to pay that amount of bill. But when you go to the winter, at this prices, a bill will come down to one third or half of it. So that's a way to see it. Okay, that okay, you're paying high amount here, so perhaps you can break it down the bill so you can pay in the winter months. But that cannot be done at the central government level. IMF is not allowing it. Now I give you an example of K Electric. K Electric is supposed to collect 100% of the bill the amount they have. If they collect 95%, that 5% goes to the K Electric profit and loss statement. So like for instance, last year K Electric has collected 92%, so the 8% goes to the loss of the K Electric. You'll find in the annual book of the K Electric. But if I am a LESCO sitting in Lahore, if I am having a 95% of recovery, then that 5% is going into the kitty of the center government because LESCO is not liable for that. That's a fundamental issue. So first, when you privatize a DESCO, when you empower the DESCO, the gains and losses both are going with the DESCO. So it's K Electric interest that they minimize the losses. So what K Electric is doing, whoever is defaulting, K Electric is sitting that with guy, okay, this is your problem. Okay, make your bill in 5 months, 6 months, 3 months. Okay, make pay from in the summer months, pay something in the winter months and stuff like that. So the default number would come and they do this installments. But when you sit in the LESCO, when you sit in the ISCO, here you have to have approval from the center, and that you have to deal with the IMF. IMF is not allowing it. So there is a problem. So you empower ISCO, you empower LESCO to do those kind of things where Electric is doing. And then even you further break down into DHAs and mall towns and barrier towns of the world that they all been collecting their bill by themselves. Then they come up with the innovative solution there. Then they use their liquidity to give some credit to their customers and charge some kind of a return on that of just to iron out their consumption. So that's not happening. And for that, the privatization and corporatization is imperative.
All right. So now, Ali, let's come to this next point, which is extremely important. The government is likely to go ahead and secure its next IMF tranche in the coming weeks, I suppose, or in the coming months. In that case, what do you see the government likely to do, and what kind of impact do you see it having for the consumers in the same time?
Well, you see, this IMF program was front loaded. All the perhaps conditions are being met. Not many conditions are left to be met, where government has to negotiate in October. So in October, you see IMF team coming in November, you perhaps will see the staff level to happen and you'll get branches and all that. So the few targets have been met. The fiscal issues are there. Perhaps if they remain the fiscal issues, they have to enhance some kind of a taxation. You may see new taxes coming up and the electricity that they're requesting IMF to allow them to stagger the bill, but IMF is not doing that. And I told you what to do. They're not doing but that's the problem. We don't have that option because we don't have privatized discourse. And then on petroleum, you see they're increasing the prices. Perhaps they'll increase the gas prices as well. So they have to keep the circular debt low. They have to keep the fiscal deficit at a permissible level. So to keep the circular debt low, they perhaps keep on passing the increase of the charges, quarterly payment, and all that into the electricity bill. They'll increase the gas bill. They perhaps have to come up with the new taxes. So all those could have all those have inflationary consequences. You perhaps would see higher inflation going forward based on that. So that's I think the implication of getting to the IMF program. But I'll tell you, without the IMF, you should be doing the same. And with the IMF or without the IMF, you need to do the reforms. And you're not doing the reforms even with the IMF. And IMF is just saying, balance your books. If you're not doing the reforms, you're not responsible country for your own people. We don't care. We take care of the lenders, you balance your books. Otherwise, you see the IMF is being saying that tax the rich and provide support to the poor, but you're not doing it. Then that's your choice. I'm cannot force you.
Ali, who do you think then is responsible for all of this? Do you think is it the masses who've made poor consumption choices? Their overall way of spending seems to be irresponsible, or do you think the buck actually stops with the government? Because at the end of the day, it is the one who has to actually go ahead, carry out those reforms, do all the essential things that are needed to actually, protect the public interest.
Okay, some say that, okay, we don't have educated people, we don't have productive people, we have lazy people. Some people say that we have an elite capture. So we need to work that the world works that everywhere in the world, every country you pick, every block you pick, there is elite culture, elite capture. Every economy you see, every rise you see, there are those cutthroat, competitive businessmen. They bring things up. You need to regulate them. You need to give them a direction. You give some certain way where you have a consumer rights, you have a public right association, you have a competition coming up, you have monopoly controls, state as a fail as providing the education to the people. State has failed to provide good employment opportunities overall for business community to come up with certain kind of business to come in. So it's a failure of state over the past 40, 50 years. You cannot bend down to A, B, or C. It's a complete state failure. It's an institutional derailment across the board. Your judiciary system is flawed. When there's no contract enforcement, you have so much heavy gelatin of the regulation, and everywhere in the regulation, the speed money works. This is complete failure of the system. And of course, there's elite capture. When elite sees that the rents are coming around from here and there, the elite will go over there. Anywhere in the world, they'll go over there. Why outside the Pakistan people only invest in IPPs? Why don't they invest in the textile business? Why don't they invest in other productive business? Why don't they invest in IT business in Pakistan? Why they invest in the businesses where you have a sovereign returns or why they invest in the consumer business where you see a thriving consumption to come up. Why don't they invest in the productive assets? Because you do not provide the opportunity. They do that investment in India. In India, if you have a $650 billion, 500 billion reserve, $500 billion out of that reserves are in the private side, in invested in Pakistan, either the board in the private sector. They are converted into the Indian rupee, and they're investing with the Indian running current account deficit, Indian running fiscal deficit. But people are ready to, the world people are ready to invest, and they see a rise of India. They keep on doing. They don't see a rise in Pakistan. They see a decline there. They see a high risk premium. So you need to undo those things. You need to change the way of thinking of the state. But we are not doing it. We are just trying to scratch surface here and there and take the place. This whole system is imploding. This whole system is imploding, and when it's exploding, explode. And better we do it by ourselves, other will explode.
So you say that we should better do it ourselves. How should we go about and do this? What might be some of the recommendations that you would like to probably table over here?
I mean, that's not easy. That's no easy solution to that. First you need to those elite, capture the 17-20 billion dollars that goes to the elite in different forms of this country. Try transfer that to the poor. You do that. Then you bring education emergency in the country. You increase the education in the country. You privatize those public sector companies. You take your print out of this agriculture side, and government reduces size. So the problem is this. One way of looking into that we got a private sector doesn't get the credit. Private sector doesn't get the whatever coming into the system, because everything being extracted by the inefficient state. You need to reduce the size of the state. Your state size has to reduce to the half at least. So, and you have to have one good education system and improve the education system. You need to take that, suck those subsidies or whatever the support you're giving into the elite over there. And nothing is easy to do in this, because who all are talking about, including me and you, are enjoying those kind of things. If we give an education, we don't have that driver or maid to serve us. That time of that person that's giving for my and your comfort would be more pricey, and that would go into some more protective assets, and you have to do that work yourself. You were not willing to do that. If your driver get the similar education as my kid get that, my driver kid get the similar education as my kid get that, then the opportunities to grow with your driver and my kid is same. You don't want that. Deep inside to the society, as all be part of the elite, I'll be all part of the 1 to 5% of this country. We don't want it. So it's much not easier to do that, to give one recommendation or the other recommendation. It's I think it's going to be very difficult for that. First what you need to come into is to the bring stability, that bring the confidence in the local economy or something. Do some privatization, go for the election, give people mandate, and let work on those things, and the state should help in cracking down those the captures, and for that state in its institution, those captures, it has to break down, and that's not easy.
Ali, it's quite interesting that you speak of stabilization and conducting elections. Recently, ADB actually made an observation where it said that political stability following general elections later this year, if achieved, will boost business confidence, as well as new standby IMF arrangement agreed with the IMF to support economic stabilization. How much do you really agree with this assessment or find this to be correct from where you report on the economy at the Business Recorder?
I mean, of course, I totally agree with the ADP finding on that. You need a political stability on that, and give people the right election, people the right to bring whoever they want to bring, and give them power to them. Stop playing out, fiddling around what you've been doing for the past 30, 40 years. Put a stop to that. We need to have a national dialogue. Bring everyone on the table. You have a friend now. You have a foe now. Yesterday, the foe was your friend, and the friend was your foe. Tomorrow, it's going to flip again. Stop this madness. Stop this madness. Been seeing this madness since I'm born. Like for the past 30, 40 years, I've been seeing this. Stop this madness. Bring everyone, bring them on the table, take everything out of that, make everyone independent. Let's go for the election. Whoever people select, let them do the job and help whoever the government in correcting the country, and that's to bring stability. And once you have this little bit of confidence back, the people who private sector who have money idle, they'll bring the money into the system. Those who have money outside, they'll bring the money into the system. Once they start doing that, then expat will start bringing the money inside. Once they do that, then the private investor from the world would bring in investment in Pakistan, and that's how India is going, and that's how we should.
So, Ali, recently, there were also reports of, foreign investments worth 75 US billion dollars coming to Pakistan. Let me ask you, were you able to come across any breakdowns of such investment? And do you see any willingness by the government to overcome some of the bottlenecks which were faced by foreign investors previously, that the government would be willing to overcome them by way of some interventions?
75 billion in the next 5 years is higher than the amount which we got in cumulatively in the past 20, 40, 30, 40 years. So if you think things have changed so much for one odd reason that you get that amount of money in the next 5 years, which didn't you get in the past 40 years, then you believe in that 75 billion. And then you say that 75 billion is coming from XYZ. When you go on those countries, when you talk to sovereign fund managers over there, these guys are shrewd guys. They look at the risk, they look at the return, they look at the institutions, they look at the country for the long shot, and they don't have Pakistan on their agenda at all. So you may get some support, political and all that, some here and there, but that's not game changer. The game changer is people of Pakistan investing in Pakistan. People of Pakistan who are siphoning their money out will bring back the money. People of Pakistan who are keeping 9, 10 trillion rupees of currency in circulation. People of Pakistan who have, according to some, 8, $9 billion of foreign currency saving in Pakistan, bring that into the protective center. People of Pakistan, those who are siphoning of the money, taking it out, bring back into the system. And then when they see that people of the Pakistan investing, the other investor will join hand and they bring that. And then those CPEC and all that funds to come in, as SFIC and all those funds to come in and do the trick. Otherwise, SFIC may at best can do what CPEC has done. And what CPEC has done is like it was good for a few years and then it's liability around us. And that liability we are paying, we pay another liability up.
Speaking of CPEC, how do you think it can actually be revived to serve the very primary purpose for which it was conceived in the first place?
Any country which have developed, which have grown in the past 30, 40 years, which have taken the people out of the poverty, which has moved up the ladder of the growth, is using those kind of uh, some magical projects to do that. They all did through inclusive growth by bringing private sector into confidence and investment in that, and by giving that comfort of the foreign investor to come in and invest in the private sector with private.
So, Ali, now let me speak of the rising fuel prices. Um, let's really speak about government's willingness to perhaps shift away and prioritize investments within the public transport sector. Recently, Islamabad, the capital administration, actually made a reference that they might want to invest in a connectivity project, bringing ease in terms of commute to the people of the Twin Cities. Do you think at a point at like this, the government should instead be, increasing the number of the buses on the existing routes instead of, borrowing money from outside lenders to build up new infrastructure for newer services instead of improving the previous services that are already in place and might not really require the higher amount of investments that the newer ones will actually require?
Absolutely, absolutely, you need to that. Like, for example, in Lahore, you came up with this metro bus project. That was a great project. And it changed it that connected the Gajumanta to this the Shadra. and new housing societies were made, and people start commuting in that. The 60 buses were roaming around. The cost of people mobility is reduced, and time of the people were saved, and the overall fuel consumption has declined. That's a beautiful. But next, you go with the orange line, which is the $2 billion projects. Lesser people moving on that. High subsidy to be given in that. Blah blah blah. And you try to be like, okay, okay, this country is doing that, I should do that, rather than connecting all the other buses into that system, converting those buses into efficient buses into the electric side and all that. You started building a new mega project. So what you need to do, you need to have a private sector in that. For example, you see Karachi, there are so many buses moving in Karachi. You have converted some into the private sector. You bring the private sector, say that, okay, this much is the rent we are taking, okay, this much rent you will have, will support you in this manner, and will provide you cheaper electricity or something and all that, and you just run it through. Or if you don't give them subsidy, let them run in either way. So you have to increase the number of buses on all the routes in the mega cities, and you have to reduce the number of bikes and cars on the roads. You have to tax the bikes and cars on certain roads to have a congestion test and help them to move to the buses. That's going to be help you out in the long term, and that's going to help you out environmentally. Of course, you're going to help in that and work on that. But these are the things which you continue on do that. These are the solution of the problems which we have on.
Ali, before we wrap up, last two questions. My second last question is basically about the export sector itself. You might come across commentators who would say that, depreciation of the rupee against the dollar would actually make our exports more competitive. But on the other hand, when we see the cost of utilities, it just keeps rising, unfortunately. So, what would you say for the export sector itself, which might find it really difficult to secure orders which would help them make more competitive in the international and the regional market?
Exchange rate is pricing. Pricing is not a policy choice. It's an outcome of policy choices you make. You make the policy choices of running high fiscal deficit. You made a policy choice of keeping real negative interest rate. You make a choices of crowding out the productive sectors. You make a choices of subsidizing your imports. So as long as you make those kind of choices, eventually your currency would depreciate. It would have an impact. So don't think from currency in that perspective. It's a price indicator. I mean, look at India. It has a stable currency relative to Pakistan. And there's so much investment coming in India, so much exports coming into India, so much IT exports there. It's not that look at the Bangladesh, it's not the currency. Or look at the Korea, the currency is like even weaker than Pakistan, but they have so much prosperity. So it's a price. Don't look at currency. Work on your fundamental problems. Work on your productivity. Work on reducing your government size. Work on reducing your government expenditure. Work on giving space to the private sector to grow. Work on your education. Work on sucking those rents from the elite and giving them to the poor people to have more inclusive growth. Your price will adjust and your economy will thrive.
But what about the export sector? I mean, much of these solutions and the interventions
So
that
the
you've
point is
described.
this export sector is a function of your economy. It's a function of your productivity. You have more functioning economy, you have a more productive economy, you have competitive edges in certain sector, comparative edges in certain sector. Those will export. Like India has a comparative advantage in services exports. They have 150, 180 billion of service exports. We have a 3 to 5 billion of service exports. Why can't we have that competitive advantage? Okay, we didn't build those kind of education system, but still that we have certain kind of advantage. We work on that. So we just think from the lens of those few textile firms who lobby, who ask for this and work on that. Think beyond that. Let them run what they are. If you and let the currency to remain on the market basis. Let them have a policy to keep it a certain level, through demand supply management, and bring this environment so that your currency will improve. And if you depreciate it by 350, export won't grow. If you depreciate it by 500, export won't grow. If you decline to 200, export won't decline as such. But everything will adjust, cost will adjust, everything will adjust, and it remain somehow where your capacity is today. There will be blip in between. Like last year, there's a 45% of currency depreciation. There's a textile firms who are making 20 billion rupees of profit. They made high profit on that. Next year, it would be not there. They will make less profit. That's it. So don't think from that perspective. Take your horizon out of the textile and stop this obsession with the currency. Of course, currency depreciation is not good for the economy, which is import dependent. It brings inflation, resulting in higher electricity prices, resulting in higher fuel prices, resulting in increase in prices of everything. But don't think from that lens. Okay, make the currency to 350, you will go export this much. Make currency to 250, you will go export this much. That's not going to happen. That's not what we have seen in the past 3 years. Your exports grew when you have higher productive capacity. Again, your export grew in textile. In 2003 to 2008, when there was a heavy investment in textile machinery, your textile export moved up from 5 billion to 12 billion. Now, 2018 to 2020, when you have a heavy investment in textile machinery, your textile export moved from 12 billion to 18 billion. Man, that's it. That's what you bring, no matter what the currency level is. It doesn't matter. And reduce those friction in the system. Like you have a very high GST, you have a very high withholding taxes. For small businesses operating in Pakistan, those are passed on to the consumer because you don't get back all that as you have informal players in your value chain. But when you export, nobody's going to price in that as an entrepreneur, you have to give it from your pocket, and you can't afford it. That's why your export doesn't grow for the smaller sector, from a newer sector, for innovative people. You have to end those kind of complicated issues in your taxation, your withholding tax, your bifurcation of filer, non-filer, your 10 types of return rates and different complications where you use speed money, where you use your textile cloud, where you use your political cloud to get some gains and all that. But those all people in the fertilizer, people in the steel industry, people in the textile industries, they all are very close to all the political parties and the people who run this country, and they make good things out of that. You have to get out of that and provide everyone the same kind of environment where you and I have a good idea we can export. That's simple as that without having access to the corridors in Islamabad or Pindi.
All right, Ali, before we wrap up, my last question is in terms of, giving your 2 cents to the policymakers on the macroeconomic stability and to the common households, who continue to be buried under the burden of inflation, what advice would you give to these two important stakeholders?
For policymakers, deregulate the economy, take your foot off the economy, reduce the size of the government, and come up with elections. Let the new government come in, let them have their mandate, try to bring the confidence back into the system. And once you have the confidence back, things will starting out. But for that, maybe you need to do the privatization, you need to do the corporatization of this public entities, do that, and take the tough step of reducing the government side. And the for household, work on your own productivity, work in your micro sector. If you don't have a skill set, try to gain some skill set. Try to have if you have some kind of education, try to attain a certain skill set online and try to provide that skill set service outside Pakistan and have the labor arbitrage and work on your own self. If you are a small entrepreneur, think of productivity on that and work on that. I mean, you can't fight with the whole system. You cannot fight with the big guys, but you can fight with your own what is with you.
Ali, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation, and we really wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for staying with us through this conversation. Our team works very hard to make this work possible, and it would mean the world to us if you could like and share our content to show your support. And if you'd like to stay informed on upcoming podcasts and other work, please hit the bell icon.